Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar on how to transition to a liquid workforce. In this short session, we'll cover what the liquid workforce is, why we believe it's important for you to move to a more liquid workforce, and the best practices for working with them. Feel free to ask your questions in the chat section, and we'll get them answered at the end of the call. I'm Sajin. I'm the founder and CEO of Liquid, an all-in-one software platform that streamlines the way you onboard, manage, and pay your Liquid workforce. We learned much of our best practices at our previous company where we provided consulting services using subcontractors. We grew from 30 to 400 Liquid workers, and since there was no existing tool that met our needs for managing this group efficiently, we built our one ourselves, which is Liquid. Today, I'll share our learnings that provide the foundation to our software. And regardless of using Liquid, we hope that what we share today will be helpful to you. As you know, the most modern companies are increasingly using a non-permanent Liquid workforce, driven by the advancement in technology such as collaboration tools, marketplaces, AI, as well as diversity of talent and their differing needs. This workforce already makes up 40% of the largest companies like Amazon and Google, and the industry spend on them will grow to more than $1 trillion in the next 10 years. So what is the Liquid workforce? Simply put, it is all the workers that are not your employees. They can be your independent contractors, 1099 freelancers, or professional service vendors. And they can be both individuals or entities. And they plug into companies anytime, anywhere, and for varying durations. The benefits of working with a Liquid workforce are simple. If you can work with them as efficiently as you do with your employees, then it massively expands your resource pool beyond just your permanent employees. And unlike your fixed employees, tapping the Liquid workforce is cost effective. Due to the flexibility and affordability, you're able to match the right resources to each project and not be limited to only the employees pool you already have. Fortunately, more and more, the best talent also want to work in this Liquid way and are available to hire in a way they weren't before. And even if you were to look for a full-time employee, hiring for a project in a Liquid way first is a great try before you buy option. Shifting to a more Liquid workforce and being successful with this group requires a different mindset and considerations. First, you want to consider the Liquid workforce as an extension of your team, augmenting your core employees with more resources, time, and expertise. Secondly, you have to start thinking about your team in terms of series of projects and not roles. As an example, instead of thinking about a need for a designer, think about your needs for a design project being done by a person of that skill, such as website redesign or logo creation, etc. And by doing so, you'll get a fuller scope of the needs that you have, and it can make the decision if it's more fitting for a Liquid worker versus an employee. There are certain roles that are strengthened by the worker having multiple clients and learning best practices from all of them, such as PR or SEO, or just personalities that make certain workers stronger when they're not permanent employees. So by thinking of these resources as workers on a bench that you can quickly tap when you need them, you can fit the perfect expertise with the need at hand. Once you're convinced of these benefits, the only thing that stands between you and successfully working with this group is remembering they're not like employees and will have different considerations. Creating the right process and systems that can take away the admin burden and make it easy for you to work with them as it is with your employees is the way you can fully leverage this group. There are many systems that are out there that make it easy for you to work with your employees. The main thing you do is onboard them quickly, set them up for benefits, and make sure they're paid every 2 weeks. Working with your Liquid workforce is more complicated because of the variable nature of this group. Most notable difference is that the continuous nature of agreeing to some scope of work, getting invoiced for it, and paying that invoice. We'll go into the details of the process, but it can feel cumbersome if not set up right. This admin overhead is one of the main reasons why companies do not take advantage of the liquid workforce as they could and should. So before we delve into the details, I want to touch on some general best practices. The most important is to get the process down from the beginning. You want to delegate proper responsibilities and set up the workflow that increases efficiency, reduces human error, and helps you stay under control. The general workflow will be very similar from company to company, but you'll just have to make it work for you in a repeatable and reliable way. In addition, you want to lean towards documenting as much as possible. Again, there are ways to make this less burdensome, but the documentation of the relationship, expectation of projects, and details of the completed work are all the ways that can give you comfort that the return on your investment for each liquid worker is as high as it can be. And as important is to make sure you have a system that allows for that process and documentations, as well as other needs like payments. There's specific systems designed for the liquid workforce, and you want to use that instead of an add-on to your employee systems, especially if you're in California and New York for compliance purposes. Working with the least number of systems, preferably just one, that automates and digitizes the whole process is the ideal situation. And if you keep these process, documentation, and system in mind generally, your transition will be smooth and completely worth it. So now let's look at the workflow a little bit more in detail. As mentioned, you first want to take the time to set up the process and systems for your company. Then you're ready to bring on your liquid workforce. You want to onboard them efficiently and properly. And once you've onboarded them and you can start working with them, you'll need the set proper expectations of what you're looking for through clear work orders. And then once the work has been completed, you'll need to send invoices. They'll need to send you invoices so you can pay them. So let's go through each section a little bit more. So if I haven't said this enough yet, it's really important for you to have the least number of tools possible. Ideally, you'll have one system that you choose that will handle at least your contracts, data collection, and your payments. Then you want to figure out what your standard onboarding process is. Is the process different for your US or international workers? And how about if they're individuals or entities? And what do you want to collect from each liquid worker that's coming on board? Minimally, we suggest having a standard template for master services or independent contractor agreement and confidential and IP agreement, and know where you feel comfortable making exceptions. In addition, as part of the setup, you want to know and where you want to have additional checks. You can add triggers for things that don't match budgets you've set or secondary approval requirements when a single work order or invoices go over a certain limit. So now you've set up and you're ready to bring on the first liquid worker. So first thing you want to do is run through a quick checklist to make sure that the worker is classified correctly. 10 to 20% of workers are misclassified, and that can lead to a lot of issues down the road. So for more on this, you can check out our resource section of our website. Once you're good with compliance, you'll be sending out a package for onboarding paperwork. As much as possible, push to use your standard documents and process, and make sure your onboarding includes not only the contract execution, but also properly collecting relevant vendor information as well as tax forms such as W-9 or W-8. One of the mistakes that I made in the past is not collecting these tax forms up front, and so make sure it's part of your onboarding package. One practice here I'd like to note is the idea of breaking out the traditional master contract into two pieces. In most consulting agreements, you see, there will be a master contract with the SOW with details of deliverables and fees attached as an amendment. We highly suggest you think about separating them. You want the master contract to set the overarching relationship between you and the liquid worker. And once they're on the bench, you're agreeing to each project underneath that umbrella of the master contract. This way, as you start new projects, it's a quick way to tap your liquid worker who has already been onboarded, but just needs the project defined and agreed to. And of course, you want to keep these executed documents organized and the relevant data extracted and usable. There are times where you'll need to access this data quickly, such as when you need an you have an employment audit. Upfront organization really pays off when you need it. As we talked about, you want a statement of work, or as we call it, a work order, similar to a purchase order, done each time you start a project. This is where you write out a deliverable and the fee structure. We highly recommend that you have it agreed to both parties each time in writing and to set the expectation up front and ensure success of the project. For each work order, it should be clear who the hiring manager is. This hiring manager is responsible for initially signing off on the work order and then giving the approval that the invoice is okay to pay. There should be only one designated hiring manager for each project. We also suggest you have a work order approval process built into your organization. For example, you can have a rule that any work order from a certain department over a certain amount must get a secondary sign-off. And if there is budget for this work, it should be clearly tracked and compared against it. At the very least, if you do these work orders right, you should always have good visibility into upcoming expenses, which will allow you to plan and manage your cash flow without any surprises. Many companies do not use a proper work order system and only know of expenses when invoices come in, which causes issues for cash management. So lastly, to payments. You want an easy way to collect invoices from your liquid workers. As importantly, you want to have them input the data for you to in whatever system you choose, because it's better for them to enter and you check versus you enter it for them. In addition, you want to provide them as many tools and templates as possible without guidance, so you don't trip up any compliance, so that the invoices you get have the necessary fields and the appropriate level of detail for you. Once you receive the invoice, you have to make it easy for you to check it. How do you know if the invoice is right? The two easiest ways to check against are against your original work order or against the history of payments to them. So make sure the data is readily available when you're about to approve or pay an invoice. And how do you do that? Systems that combine this work order and invoices into the same system is a pretty good start. Similar to the work order approval system, you want to have approval policies in place for invoices. Most companies have rules in place for invoices, but not for work orders. We believe it's important to have both because work orders help you keep control before work starts, and invoices help you keep control of the cash. We also believe that the ability to pay digitally is really important. Yes, there's more float for you if you cut checks, but the few days you get from the check, is not worth the inefficiencies or the inability to keep track of where the payments are. To me, paying digitally just reduces the number of questions you get from your liquid workers. And lastly, you want a payment system that easily syncs to your accounting and helps you and your accounting team reconcile the payments. It also readies you for the tax filings at the end of the fiscal year. All those best practices that we've learned over the years, we've built into the Liquid platform. And if you want to check us out, please visit our website or contact us. As mentioned, I'm a founder building our own company using the Liquid workforce. I use all the best practices through our Liquid software to manage this growing bench of experts who plug into our company when we need them. You can see my lawyer to designer to development shop, accountant, all working with me in different ways. And it took me a shorter amount of time to have them onboarded and ready to work with me because of all the upfront setup. And being able to supplement my team core team with those who might not even be available to me unless they were working in a liquid way has been a key to building and growing my company in the most cost-effective, flexible, and smart way, and hope that you can leverage this liquid workforce in similar ways. So I hope this webinar was a helpful overview for how you can transition to a more liquid workforce. Whether you use our product or not, you can put these best practices to use and feel confident in working with this group. Our contact information is here, and now we'll take some questions.
Great, Sajan. We've got a couple of questions in on the chat. The first one is, you talked about compliance issues. What are some of the specific compliance issues I should be aware of?
Yes, yeah, that's a pretty interesting topic that we can delve into. There are times where you'll have to prove that you've classified your employees correctly. One specific example I've seen is that the contractor that you've worked with in the past unknowingly goes to file for unemployment, which triggers an audit for your company. You'll have to show evidence not only that this person, but every other 1099 worker in your company and why they were classified in a certain way. So instead of scrambling for this data, it's best to have all your worker data, contracts, work orders, invoices easily accessible and able to be outputted. And you'll just save so much time by having all this organized.
Thanks for sharing that. The next question is, I use a lot of international vendors. Can I still use Liquid, and what are some considerations around that?
Yeah, we'll actually have a specific webinar around this topic later. But yes, you can use Liquid for international vendors. In general, the best practices for working with international vendors is to understand the local requirements. But by having proper contracts and collecting W-8 forms, you'll already be in much better shape than others. You can paying internationally generally is very expensive and a little bit of a pain. So you'd want a solution that allows you to do that easily and reliably and rather, inexpensively. Liquid has the onboarding process for contracts and W-8 built in, and the international payments as well. So please contact us if you would like to check out our solution.
Great. The next question is, Liquid seems similar to what I do in Bill.com. Is there a reason I should consider switching to Liquid?
Oh, yes, of course. Specifically, we were actually users of Bill.com and appreciated their features. The only issue was that it starts with invoice collection and payment like other invoice payment solutions. And what's missing is the onboarding process as well as the work order section of Liquid. And so basically, when you go to pay an invoice, we didn't easily know if it was right or okay to pay and had to go scramble for that data. And so we wanted to know that history of payments as well as the work order agreements readily available when I was about to pay, and in addition to everything else. So we believe we're a much more comprehensive solution that takes care of the onboarding, managing, and the payments, whereas a solution like Bill.com takes care of just the payments.
Great. The next question is, how does Liquid compare to Gusto? I pay my few contractors out of that.
Yes, Gusto, like other payroll solutions, are great for onboarding and managing your employees. In fact, we use that tool ourselves for our own employees. But that's what the solution is built for and not for the contractors. The flow for working with contractors, as mentioned before, is different and more similar to the way you work with your suppliers and your vendors. In addition, for compliance reasons, you want to separate out your contractors with your employees so you can show that they're different and you've classified them properly. One of the easiest things that you can do is treat them differently by having them in separate platforms and separating out managing of contractors in different places than your employees. Actually, one of the first things that a good CFO will do when they join a company.
That's a great tip that I think is probably new to a lot of people. We're running out of time, so let's just do one more question. The last one is, I don't have a standard master services agreement or an NDA. What's the most cost-effective way to get these documents in order?
Yeah, you think you need a lawyer, an expensive lawyer, to get these right forms, but it's actually not true. There are many templates out there you can use, and including ones you can get from Liquid. The most important thing here is to actually just have these documents and make sure that your vendor signed them so you can protect your relationship, your IP, and also your money. Again, yeah, you want these documents and the data from them pretty organized so you can access them easily. And if you want, we have everything in Liquid, and you could, contact us to check that out. Okay, great. Well, I think we're going to be ending this webinar at this point. I hope this was helpful. Again, please reach out if you have any more questions or would like to learn more about our solution, and we appreciate your time today. Thank you.